MWSD meeting to order on September 5th, 2019 at 7:30 p.m. Roll call, please.
Director Boyd?
Here.
Director Marshall?
Here.
Director Slater-Carter?
Present.
Director Harvey?
Here.
Director Lohman?
Here too.
Well, welcome everybody. It's a sunshiny day here, and other than that, the president has nothing to say. Oral comments, items other than those on the agenda, and it appears I have two items. One is, you can handle them both at the same time, Greg Diegas. One is MWSD succession planning, and the other is MWSD newsletter.
Was that C-session planning when we leave, or succession planning?
Greg Diegas, Montara.
Just being
It
cute.
could be both.
So I'd like to start with the issue of the newsletter. I'm aware, although I'm not privy to any of the secrets about the negotiations and the lawsuits, there's a lot going on here with lawsuits, with a rate study, with Sam, falling apart, I hear. And my request is that the board not wait any further before issuing a newsletter to apprise the ratepayers that things are happening. You may not have any conclusions, but I think people will react better to get a newsletter sooner rather than later, because they may get the next thing and it may be bad news. So that's a suggestion. That was my agenda item.
Thank you.
Now, the next item, it's not that I'm saying you guys look old, but you've been working very hard. And some of you have been doing this for a very long time. And even before I read Dan's presentation, I had thought of raising this issue of a succession plan for the board, because I think we need to plan for the next generation of young puppies like Scott. We're going to come in and, help take the baton. Now, in successful organizations I've seen elsewhere, this is often accomplished by having, let's call them junior members, join in an adjunct capacity and do little chores and help out, and they kind of get to see what's going on, and people get to see whether they're any good, and then they could run for the board later. So that's one thought. And the other thing is, I don't know what's going to be required to recruit people to work as hard as you guys do. Maybe you're going to have to give yourselves a pay raise just before you quit.
What's the big pay that
In order, was it $75 a meeting? In order to attract people, you might have to have a more compelling value proposition. But that's my thought. I would like to see you do something in the spirit of thinking about the succession plan, because you guys have a ton of knowledge capital, a ton. All right, and it needs to be preserved and passed on. Thanks.
Thank you, Greg.
Don't forget the free cookies.
Which are donated by the board member.
The cookies are important.
Okay, moving right along then to public hearing, we have none. Consent agenda,
Is coming next week.
coming next week, okay. Old business, none. New business, item 1, initial evaluation of sewer authority mid-coast side organizational improvement, received presentation by wastewater management specialists, LLC.
Thank you, Catherine. So we had an opportunity to listen to Dan Child with Wastewater Management Specialists. That was last Monday before last, on August 26th. And he gave a presentation after he was tasked with essentially interviewing a bunch of people at the agency and around the agency, and trying to establish a task list of improvements. This is essentially that the presentation was very well received at SAM. And it was asked that Dan make the presentation at every individual member agency. So we're the first one, I think, to listen individually to you, even though I know that some of our board members actually attended the meeting and were present. But after that, I think you're scheduled to go to Granada and the city of Half Moon Bay as well.
East Point Half Moon Bay has decided they are going to see whether they want me to come and see them or not.
Huh.
And made the commitment at this point.
Okay. So ultimately, this item is just for information purposes. So if Sam is moving forward in this direction, in my mind, this would require some sort of authorization by the individual member agencies through a budget amendment or a similar process. So I think what we want to do today is listen to Dan and have a discussion about this. Maybe give direction to staff so we can work with Sam on trying to see if there's, we want to hone down the scope of services accordingly, or however this, whatever work we can do moving forward with this.
And do you have slides?
Yes.
Okay, then I
So
will
with this,
move.
I would say we hand the word over to Dan and turn this machine on.
Save my vision.
Could I share this space with you?
Get your own cookies. Unless you
So
want
why
to
do
go
we
further
have
away
this
to the
machine?
audience or something like that.
And
While we're
then-
waiting for the machine to start, I'll just maybe start with a little bit of an introduction. First of all, thank you for having me here this evening. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with everyone and let you know what I found in my assignment with Sam in approximately a 30-day time. Personally, I've worked in the wastewater industry for nearly 39 years now. Started out in a little plant in southeastern Utah, and I've been in Southern California, Northern California, and also worked as for a private contract operator, Veolia North America, who is, at the time, was the largest contract operations, they still are as far as I know, the largest contract operator in the world. And I was vice president of operations for them in the western U.S. The last 12 years or so, I was over the hill at Silicon Valley Clean Water, worked there, and just have the opportunity to work here and to help Sam become a highly functional organization. It's something that really piques my interest. I started off by speaking with 20 different people, all of the board members, all of the member agency managers, a couple of ex-managers for the agency, a lot of staff at SAM, just to kind of get an idea of feeling for what individuals were seeing. And I know you received a copy of all of the comments that I put together, and some of those were mentioned many times by people, others, ones that quoted in quotes, were specific ones that someone said that I thought everybody should really be aware of. So, yeah.
Is that posted on the SAM site, or is that?
It was attached to your agenda packet.
It's part of the packet today.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's also, I believe, on the same site. They're supposed to post it. I have not
This is
verified
not,
that myself.
I didn't see it.
It's not,
It's at the
yeah.
end of this presentation. on our
Okay.
website.
Okay. I will get that there. I'll check on that. Yeah. Sam is not alone in this quandary. 13 years ago, when I first walked in the door at Silicon Valley Clean Water, at the time South Bayside System Authority, they were facing virtually the same type of thing. There was controversy at the board level. There was deferred maintenance in their facilities, and it took a lot of effort to get it turned around. But it is turned around and doing a lot better today. A lot of things are the effect of the 1972 Clean Water Act. We're all very familiar with that. Clean Water Act did a lot of great things for cleaning up the environment and cleaning up our waterways. But it's in my opinion, one of its big flaws was that it provided funding at 87.5% for all of these facilities, but it did not look to the future of how we were going to maintain or replace these facilities. It just it was a one-time thing. And it lulled a lot of us into a complacent attitude that, hey, it's paid for, it's here, we've got it. Nobody worried about the future. Well, the future's here today, and, we have facilities that are reaching the end of their useful life, and some of us have been caught, most utilities have been caught in a situation where they have not planned for that. We work very hard, the staff at SAM, and in talking with them and observing them, they're hardworking, they're dedicated, they really try to do the very best they can. They definitely have a feeling at times that they're the stepchild, that they're kind of on the side of everybody else's priorities, which is a normal thing where you're in a joint powers agreement that you guys have your things that you have to take care of. The city of Half Bay has not only water and wastewater, but they have parks, police, fire, those types of things. It's very typical, again, for JPA to feel this way. However, they can function at very high levels, working together and creating a synergy, for lack of a better word, where everybody is trying to accomplish the same thing. Let's go to the start of the slides. So, as I interviewed these 20 people, I came up, I actually whittled it down to 10 categories of findings. I could have had a whole bunch more, but I decided it was getting too big. Finances is the biggest issue down there. They have still not completed their 2017-18 audit, which is kind of incredible that they're have that problem. They need to get that fixed. I'm working with the financial people there to try and help them pin things down. I am not an accountant, so I'm not saying that I can go in there as an accountant or an auditor and fix it, but I have been through several audits and have the ability to help them identify issues where they can get action from their people to make it better. Once that audit's done, there's a statement in these slides that will be done in 120 days, but there actually has proven to be a problem. It's probably going to be more like February before they actually get done with the 17-18 audit. And then they have to wait 60 days before they can start their 18-19 audit. So basically they're going to be starting their 18-19 audit when they should have been starting their 19-20 audit. So we're still going to be behind for a year or so. Trust is the biggest issue of all. Trust literally is across the board, from board members to member agencies to staff. Everybody has trust issues, and that's a really big issue that we need to talk about. The board itself and how it functions, the joint powers agreement, how it functions. SAM is without a manager right now. That's obviously an issue, and there's been issues in the past with the manager. The collection systems work. I'll get to some of that more in following slides. When I say SAM management, that is how the management actually is functioning, how the day-to-day management functions. The staff people, we just had a discussion on succession planning. SAM is facing a huge succession issue at the staff level. They got a lot of people that are really close to retiring that will go out the door with a lot of knowledge. The treatment plant, the deferred maintenance is caught up, and then recycled water is an issue that with the drought situation is definitely challenging us all today. Let's go to the next slide, please. So, as you will see, if you did have the list at the end of this slide presentation, there's a lot more comments under each one of these issues, but I tried to just grab some of the bigger items. I talked about the finances, the audit's an issue, the budget. I've been doing budgets in the municipal sector for almost 40 years now, and I've yet to find one as confusing as SAM's budget is. It is very hard to decipher what exactly is going on, and mostly it's because it's all put together. The capital, the O&M, everything is all lumped into one, so it's kind of hard to determine exactly what's going on. The new finance person down there, Stacy is working on separating those and getting a better budget process in place this coming year. She's only been on board since, I think, first of the year, January, maybe it was December, but basically less than a year. So between getting the audit straightened out and the budget, she's definitely challenged. Obviously, we need adequate funding for CIP, O&M, just to be able to take care of these, but the last statement there, the lack of transparency, is a big issue, I think, that's faced all of you as member agencies, that you've not always been able to tell exactly what's going on at SAM, and that makes anybody hesitant to spend money. If you don't know where it's going, it's really hard to spend that money. So, moving on to trust, like I said, whether it's perceived or a real trust issue, it really doesn't matter, because if somebody perceives there's a trust issue, there is a trust issue. So, and whether board members versus staff, staff versus the board, staff versus the member agencies versus staff, board versus board, it all is people don't know what the other hand's doing. It's a real issue with a question of, do I believe what I'm hearing? And do I feel like I'm getting all the information I need? And I think that really change has to start at the board levels. First of all, the board is the leader, and they need to establish a trusting atmosphere that people can work with. I'm a real believer in ownership, and I use that word versus buy-in all the time. Buy-in generally means that I come up with an idea and I want you to buy into my idea and accept it. Ownership, on the other hand, means that you're part of the development. You help form the idea, you help form the action, and work together. And I think that is really missing at SAM. People do not have ownership of the facility, other than, honestly, Tim, who's sitting here in the audience. I think he may own the whole place if the truth is known. And he definitely is dedicated to that agency. So the member agencies need to learn to be able to trust SAM and vice versa, but I believe SAM's got to be the one that leads that, through their actions and through providing transparency and clarity in what's going on there. Then you guys can start believing what you're hearing and seeing and being able to move forward with those things. One issue that came up and that's there at the end is the EPA and the state view SAM as one entity. If there's a problem, they don't come after each individual one of you, they come after SAM, and you guys get pulled into it. So it is a single entity that they have to deal with. Next slide. The board, policymakers, they're the vision setters. They're the ones that need to, as I imagine you do here as well, you set the direction, you bring up things, maybe sea level rise, and you direct staff to check into it and come back and tell you what's going on, make recommendations. Once you decide how to move forward, you turn to your staff to implement it and make it happen. One thing that I picked up from several people is SAM did an organizational strategic plan about a year ago, and the member agencies do not feel like that strategic plan addresses their concerns, which is a really big issue, because joint powers agreement and member agencies really have three functions. The first is you're the customer, and as a customer you have needs, and the joint powers should be fulfilling your needs. That's their job, is to fulfill your wastewater needs. The second one is, to use a private sector analogy, is you're the venture capitalists. You're the guys out here that have to put the money into the facility. And when you do that, you need to be receiving enough information that you feel comfortable doing that. And finally, the last thing is member agencies are a great resource for the joint powers agreement, or agency. Sam should be able to turn to you guys when they have an issue, and you may not have the answer, but you may have experience that helps them come to the right answer, and as a group, they work together. Today, I don't see that happening. It's one for one and one for one, and it's not a very collaborative atmosphere between the member agencies and SAM as far as working together. At the same time, SAM is, that last statement, is a independent agency. It has to function to serve the wastewater needs of the coast side. So there's a need to maintain their direction. They should be the wastewater experts, but that doesn't mean they always have every answer, and that's where the member agencies can help them. Next one is the SAM manager. They're in the process of trying to hire somebody, actually in the process of trying to find a headhunter to do the recruitment. Got a lot of input from people that does not need to be a grade 5 operator or an engineer, but you need to have somebody that's experienced with managing JPAs that can bring unity, communicate, be transparent, and interact well with everybody. I think it's just a management style that is critical to the success of joint powers agreements. Next slide, please. Collection system. One question came out: should SAM be in the collections business at all? Another one that came out from multiple people actually was the current practice of one-year contracts is absurd. It's very difficult for SAM to be able to plan, hire staff, amortize equipment, and that type of thing over only a one-year period, and never knowing whether they're going to have a contract from year to year. So, generally speaking, in the private sector, I know at Veolia, we would never look at anything less than a 5-year number. This was minimum, have contracts as long as 20 years on those types of things. Again, deferred maintenance, replacement needs to be done. There's a feeling at the member agencies that the CWICs, which is the electronic reporting that's required by the state, is not real well coordinated, and the SAM needs to provide better detailed monthly reports of what was done in your systems, so you have an idea of where things are happening and what needs to be done. One comment that came out that I thought was very good is SAM's primary job is to prevent spills. That it has gotten better over the last 3 years, and the last manager was able to motivate and train staff to make that happen. It's interesting that a lot of times the people that said that were not the ones that you necessarily would have thought would have said it. You might have thought they had differing opinions at times, but it really did come down to somebody recognized that it has got better over the last 3 years. That's a great thing. And that we need to develop a better pressure relief, vacuum relief maintenance program and related SOPs to make sure those are being maintained so we don't have leaks, because that is a common area for leaks in all force mains. On the management staff, I mentioned earlier that Tim definitely takes ownership. He's also, I can tell you, he is there 11 to 13 hours a day typically, and I don't know how he does it, including weekends a lot of times. He's definitely working a lot. I also got comments on the other side that the management staff needs to be there at least 40 hours per week. There's a perception that some management staff isn't there as much as they should be. So it's an interesting observation. Private office space, their cubicles are open, and I don't know, if they need to do an interview with somebody or employee discipline or something like that, they really don't have a good place to do that without kicking. The 2 closed offices they do have they have to kick those people out. They need to definitely document their policies, practices, procedures, SOPs for the entire organization. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And they are just, it seems to them that there's constant change going on, that there's no stability in the organization. They're not sure of what's going to happen next, and it makes it difficult for staff to feel comfortable at work. And Lastly, succession planning. They have several people that are going to leave, and a ton of institutional knowledge is going to go out the door, which is not a good thing, that we need to try and get transferred and have people come on board early enough to be able to transfer that information. And I think I probably covered most of this, but SAM staff think they're understaffed. Member agency staff thinks SAM's overstaffed. I think it's an area where we can really do a staff and evaluation plan, look at that. Wages, same thing again. A lot of the SAM staff feel that their wages are not competitive with the other people in the Bay Area, and some member agencies feel like they're way overpaid. So I think you need to look at a total compensation basis, because my evaluation, just looking at real quick, because I think their salaries are pretty close, but some of their benefits may be a little bit behind compared to what's going on in other agencies. Talked about succession planning, institutional. Their mechanic side of things is definitely lacking. They only have 2 mechanics, one of them that goes out and tries to take care of all the pump stations, and the other one that tries to take care of the treatment plant. And if you look at both of them, those 2 people are doing an outstanding job considering what they're working with, but they are definitely behind in their maintenance. Kishan, who is the acting manager right now, interim, he is also their engineer on site. And I got comments that he does a lot of projects, but he is underfunded, and there's no O&M staff to support the projects when he's doing them. So he has a hard time getting the support he needs to be able to make shutdowns and tie-ins and that type of stuff that they need for that. Recruitment's always difficult when you're in an isolated situation like you are out here on the coast, and they have a requirement for being able to respond in an hour to a call out. Basically that means you have to live on the coast. Even, I mean, we've all tried to get over 92 at one time or another, that an hour may not be enough. And we really had a suggestion that we should evaluate the organizational chart for SAM, not just their organization, but also who are they having do contract services, and is that really the most cost-effective way to be doing the work that they're doing? Next slide, please. And finally, this slide is the treatment plant. Like I said, it's definitely deferred maintenance is catching up. One thing that came out in talking to people is, in the private sector, generally speaking, we look at the return on investment to determine whether whether we should spend money. Unfortunately, that doesn't always apply to municipal decisions, because we're mandated to provide a certain service. At the same time, we definitely need to be doing it in the most cost-effective manner to avoid paying more than what we need to. It's a challenge we have. Should always be looking for the best value. The lowest cost is not always the best way to do it, but at times we have to, because we're a municipal organization, have to take low costs. So it's all a trick that we have to, a balancing act to make sure we get the best value. If you're proactive and take care of things in advance, in the long run, it will save you a lot of money. It's just a known fact, running things to failure in the wastewater industry generally results in spills, which result in fines. And you're better off fixing things in a proactive manner, planning the replacement and doing what you can. The question about whether there's a need for on-site flow equalization and whether Half Moon Bay needs storm flow equalization came up. Something that I think we need to evaluate at the plant level. I don't think it should be driven by a political issue as much as it should be driven by what is best for that treatment facility. And their number one digester is over 20 years old. It's never been cleaned. Typically they're cleaned every 7 to 10 years, so it's well behind its needed cleaning. And then recycled water, last but not least, but the golf course, the Coastside County Water District, the City of Half Moon Bay, SAM, and all of you need to be involved in working together. The golf course can likely use 100% of the average dry weather flow production. However, wet weather use and storage is a big question that I don't think has really been answered in the work they've done today. And that's a big issue when you're doing recycled water. You've got to be able to do something with the water year round. And it might be that you still have to do ocean discharge in the winter, but it's hard to say. And last there is do scalping plants, which means small plants out in areas where you can use the water make any sense. And that's another evaluation that should probably be done. Are there demands for water that a scalping plant and the water in that area that you can actually make that work? So those were the findings. The next steps that I came up and talked to them is, we're really looking at a culture change. It has taken 40 years plus to get SAM to where it is today. These things did not happen overnight. There's a lot of turmoil going on, a lot of intertwined issues, and it's going to take time to change it. It's not going to be, you can't walk in there and one of the board members, really was, how can we make this happen faster? It's like, you just can't change culture any faster. 2 years is honestly a short period of time, 5 years to really change it, but I think we can get the programs and the systems in place in a couple of years to make it so that you're heading in the direction that it works. The financing needs stand out as a definite thing we need to look at, but all of these efforts, all these issues I just went through need to be addressed, and working together we can make it happen. Now saying that, that means the board has to take the leadership role. You have to put the past behind you and move forward. And I know that's easy to say and very difficult to do, but it's really what we got to do, and the only way to do that is to build trust. And I think that's the biggest thing. Trust is the biggest issue that we really have to work on, and it's going to require some very open communication, transparency, some compromise, SAM to perform, honesty, and just a lot of work of being together to make this change. Again, the finance is an issue that we're just going to have to focus on and work directly with the auditors and SAM staff to get those audits done. Like I said, it's not going to happen by the end of the calendar year. It's going to be February, it looks like now. One question that we did come up is, should we do a forensic audit? I don't know if you all understand that when auditors come into a municipal agency, they don't do a dollar by dollar audit like you do in a lot of businesses. Their audits really are more looking at policies, procedures to make sure you're following what you're supposed to be doing. A forensic audit is looking at dollars and cents and making sure every dollar is accounted for. My feeling is they're expensive to do, they're time consuming. I think we should wait and see what these two audits that they're in the middle of right now come out with and determine whether there's any suggestion or a need to do a forensic audit that, the staff there does not feel that there has been an issue with embezzlement or any type of thing like that. But I know there is some concern over some of the billing issues and where money is, and some people feel like, agencies feel like they paid stuff and SAM thinks they still owe money. If that's the case, we may need to get into a forensic audit and look at that. But it's probably a year or so away before we should make that determination based on what these audits, the standard audits typically come out with. Next, please. Continuing on that is the budgets. I already talked a little bit about this, so I won't spend a little more time, but basically we need to break it into categories that are very clear and easy to understand where the money is going, so it's easy for your staff to bring recommendations to you when they analyze the SAM budget. They can look at it, and frankly, your managers should not be dictating or involved in the day-to-day how this does, but they definitely need to be part of that process of a budget, of being able to understand what's going on. If we put it in an easier format, I think they'll find that they can get the detail that they want, so they're comfortable making the recommendation to you to move forward with it compared to what's going on today. And from a timing standpoint, we just got to make sure it's available early enough for you to be able to make those decisions. already talked a little bit about past billing and policies. There's a whole bunch of policies that they don't have in place that we need to look at. So they are using, just starting in July, what's called the Tyler software package. It's a very widely used software package that they've adopted. Seems to be working well. They're also going to be using OpenGov, which is a online site where you can download all this information and anybody can go to it. And here, I think it's in the next early October, I think they're having training for people to use OpenGov. So if anybody wants to come to that, I think they're welcome to. I think we're going to put out the invitations, especially to the managers, so that they'll be able to see that. And also, one of the things is using staff to do what they're best capable of doing, and making sure that they are well used, and also that there's controls in place so that they're not doing things that could get them in trouble by doing, jobs where they may have a conflict of interest, and especially on the financial side. Next. As I said, leadership starts with the board. You need to address those big issues first, and globally, the finance and trust are the two biggest things right now. Got to work together. We have to listen to each other. We have to take ownership, and we got to build trust, and more trust. And I ordered the book, The Speed of Trust, for all of the SAM people. For some reason, it still hasn't shown up. I actually was on Amazon today sending them a nasty email saying, "Where's my books?" So they'll hopefully show up soon. But if you haven't read The Speed of Trust, it's a great book by Stephen Covey that talks about the importance of trust and how to use it in the workplace and in life in general. So bottom line is, I believe the sewer authority mid-coastline can be fixed. I looked at it, I've worked with in similar situations in my career, been able to see places turn around and develop the trust all the way up through the member agency level, which is critical. The audits need to be figured out in the next, now let's say 180 days. The new budget process is coming. Communication is absolutely critical. We've got to provide information and listen and make sure that we're doing everything we can. Member agencies, board, SAM staff, consultants, everybody needs to be involved in it. And compromise is always part of communicating. You've got to work together to make that happen. So let's go to the next one. One thing that I've worked with for several years is what I refer to as a process control management program. This program started out, myself and a gentleman that I worked with at Veolia started a program with the operators in a treatment plant to try and get the ownership. They had a real problem, as I stated earlier, of this almost a militaristic type of a management system where I said to go do this, you go do it, when you're done come back and I'll go tell you what to do next. And people were going through the routine, but they didn't have any owner. They didn't know why they were doing things. They didn't understand what the impact was. If something didn't go exactly right, it's like, oh well, that's not what he told me to do, so I'm not going to worry about it. So the whole idea of this process control management plan is to get everybody that's affected by the system involved in it. So when we started this system, at first we used the operators. We'd bring a maintenance person in, a lab person in, so everybody understood what was going on and had some input, and then we'd come up with targets and goals and actions to take depending on what you found. And it worked great there. And about 5 years later, I got thinking about it and thought, why don't we use this everywhere? And you can use it in finance, you can use it in administration, you can use it everywhere. And so it's really, for the last 15 years, been my management style, is to try and work with people to get everybody to take ownership and be part of the decisions and set up these programs, and it's worked absolutely fantastic. It's a big job. It takes full-time effort for a couple of years to design it, implement it, come up with all the SOPs and policies, everything you need, the training, and get it involved. But once it's up and running, people love it because they are part of the team. And it really brings ownership and pride to the guy that's doing the work, or the lady, doing the work on a daily basis. I believe doing this will turn Sam into a leader, not only in the wastewater industry, but in the whole world, in the government industry. And government as a whole needs this type of thing. It'll take us through the challenges that we've been faced and be able to fix it. Let's go to the next one. So, probably already talked, well, what this was, the board had given me certain items that they wanted me to address in this presentation, and I just was highlighting here that we did talk about organizational effectiveness and efficiency, getting policies and procedures current. By using a process control management program, we will have effective and efficient organizational structure, staffing levels, compensation, succession planning. I am not a compensation expert, so I told them we would have to hire an outside compensation person to make that work. We need to define the rules in the decision-making processes between SAM and the member agencies, and need to develop and provide training on those standard procedures to the board and the staff. Excuse me. I'm fighting a little bit of a scratchy throat this week. Providing assistance in the hiring of the new SAM manager. One of the things I'm really still working on is identifying traits that the board feels is important to the SAM manager. Sam has, well, I talked to one of the gentlemen that's worked out there for 30 years. He told me in 30 years he's been through 14 managers, which is kind of crazy. People only be there an average of less than 2.5 years. So my job's not to be the manager. I want to be there as a consultant to help the new manager, to strengthen them and be able to get these policies and these procedures in place while he's doing his day job, because he's still got a lot of work to do, and I can definitely, thank you very much, help with that. Also, succession planning and funding needs to be addressed. The other thing is working closely with the SAM engineer and their consultants to make sure we get the treatment plant in the shape it needs to be. One of the things in wastewater management specialists has several consultants that are involved with us that are experts in process improvements, constructability, even construction inspection, startup commissioning, training, instrumentation and control specialists, odor and corrosion control, maintenance, and virtually every aspect of running wastewater treatment. We have access to working with people that are extremely focused on their individual parts of that. And last here is the recycled water. Bottom line is recycled water, the next drought's coming. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. You know, we all are faced with global warming and sea level rise, and unfortunately sea level rise is not going to solve our drought issues. It's going to be a real issue, and we need to work together as groups that are part of SAM today, with the end users, with the public and the regulators, to make sure we're doing everything we need to do to make sure that we have a system that meets the needs of the coast side. Next. So, one thing is, there are no specific reports or deadlines associated with the work, other than it's about a 2.5-year program. A monthly report will be provided to the board, and I'm assuming it would come on up to you guys about what has been completed and what's expected to be done in the coming month or months, depending on what's going on. Financial aspects, the agency and the finances are just a huge issue. So the process control management program will address a lot of this. We've got to get those audits done, we've got to get the budget done, but then we got to get systems in place to make sure it never happens again. And like I said, we're expecting it's going to take 28 months of full-time effort to address these issues, and that was arrived at backing into this work based on the scope of work that they asked me to look at this time. So let's go to the next one. So totally looking at about 4,650 hours of time, and the finance department assessment interaction, the process control management plan, which is a lot of hours there, obviously over a year's worth of hours. That involves everything from creating these plans to the planned evaluation, the staffing evaluation. It's all put in together to make that work. Succession planning, we need to put that together. The JPA assistance, that is there to assist the attorneys from an organizational standpoint of what's really going to work when they get around to redoing the JPA. Supported the CIP and recycled water, and some little bit of time for the general manager recruitment consultation. So this is the scary slide. Basically a $1.4 million project over 2.5 years, plus the cost of the compensation analysts. When we do that, the top one, the principal, would be me, working at full-time, 4,600 hours over 28 months. One thing about my rates is all my expenses and everything are included in it, so there's no additions to this for expenses or travel or anything like that. I am based out of Mesquite, Nevada, and travel over here. I have other clients in the Bay Area, so it keeps me in the area, but I have made arrangements that if they decide to go forward with this, and if you approve it, that I would basically be full-time at SAM. The subcontractors are the people I talked about that have the special talents we bring in, estimating that 25 hours per month on average over the time period. That's not going to be 25 hours every month, but there may be months with 0 and months with 100, but basically that's what we're looking at. And I think that's the end. So, thank you very much. I'm open to questions and comments.
Yep, let's turn the light on.
Yeah, I have a question. So, for Catherine and Rick and you, sir, what's the status of the decision process? So will all 3 boards make that decision?
Yes.
Or will the SAM board?
No,
No, all 3 boards
All
need
3
to
boards.
be.
all three,
Because the expense is much, well, Catherine, you want to answer?
all 3 boards need to make the decision and pass a resolution in favor of that decision, according to the JPA.
Okay, and you'll be presenting this to the other 2 boards then?
Like I said, Half Moon Bay feels like they've sent the package forward, and they're talking to their council to determine whether they want an actual presentation, but they may do it at their staff level. They haven't decided yet, but
Okay.
Granada is scheduling me as soon as they can, but their schedule's a little bit tight.
Okay, all right. Thank you very much. Anybody else?
Any other, I know Greg has a question. Why don't you come up and then we'll
Okay,
go to the board.
so those of you who have computers already have a PDF copy of this. Thinking maybe you haven't seen it, but I think everybody else got it. So I thought I was going to come here and talk as an expert
On computer system procurement, when I looked at the presentation, I'm glad to see I don't have to do that, even though I do consider myself an expert in that regard. But I was able to get,
And if we ever need it, we'll ask you.
right, I was able to get 4 professionals in Public Works to look at the presentation on the SAM website, including John Pugliarese, who's a regional exec at Synagro, of whom Dan was a client, Chibi Alloway of Woodward and Curran, which is a national clean water infrastructure and environmental consulting firm, and a former regional VP of Veolia, where Dan worked, and Mary Martis and Holly Kennedy, who are respectively a project manager and a senior vice president of HTR Inc., which is a major national engineering consultancy. Now, I got their comments, and I've included them in this document. And so the good news is we don't need to talk about the computer system because apparently there isn't one. It's just $1.5 million for time. So I think Dan hit the nail on the head in his report about trust. But I think there's a lot more work needed to define and responsibly decide on the specifics of his request. I do think, and the people who I talked to support this, that with Dan's background as GM of a public works agency, he could be immediately used to help stabilize two things at SAM: trust and management. And the people I check with all support this belief. Now, he's proposed a succession plan as one consulting deliverable, and leveraging that concept, I'd suggest two immediate deliverables. In other words, I would focus a task plan with dates in sequence. The first thing is, everybody I talk to says you ought to have the GM there because all the stuff that's changing, including the PCMP, et cetera, that person needs to have ownership and help define that. So the first priority should be help select and hire the new GM. And the second should be define and implement the remedial management steps for the board and the SAM management. One of the consultants listed some sources for industry standard frameworks for self-assessment, essentially auditing the maturity of a board and an agency might be useful. But that led to two questions that I'd like to see in a focused short-term proposal from Dan. One question I have, immediate question, is under what conditions would you accept the position of GM of SAM, and if not, why not?
Why don't you answer about PERS?
Well, that's it. I'm a PERS retiree, so I would have to come out of PERS, and I would lose benefits that I have now because of my retiree situation. So for that reason, PERS has limits, and because it just would not make sense to me financially.
Okay.
You just can't do it.
But
Okay.
as a consultant, you can, right? 'Cause that's what you
So
said.
I can.
And the second question is, what do you think about the revised initial priorities that I proposed and some of the people I talked to? And that's all I have to say.
The two I know, I would have a lot of respect for, and the others, I mean, I think basically they, as I stated, I think all of the priorities have to be intertwined and meshed together, but I think getting a manager on board is absolutely critical. I make that statement to them, that my job is not to be the manager, my job is to support the new manager, and we've got to get a manager on board. So I think you're right on track.
How do you think we came to meet it?
I hear he applied for the, did you apply for the job? No, you couldn't have applied for the job, because at first. Now, how did you meet him?
We
brought
started
it.
looking for
Oh.
a manager. It's not mysterious to us that when one resigns, that we have to find one, and as quickly as we can. You mentioned how many managers we've had at SAM over a period of time. I just kind of ran through the list of, since about 2000. It's been about 10, but half of those have been interims,
Okay.
right? So it's really 5, and of those, one of them was very short tenure. But in general, we've had people there for a few years each. So it's
So I was misled a little bit.
well, in the 30 years back, I don't know about 10 years before. So I think we all like to see greater stability. We've enjoyed very good stability here at Montara. We've had, before Clemens, we had George Irving for many years, and then Clemens has been here since, and that kind of continuity, we know here about the value of that continuity, and we've strived to get that kind of continuity at SAM. SAM's tougher because it's a JPA. JPAs are hard.
I've been fortunate because I basically have spent my entire career, except for one employer, or one municipal employer. My private sector obviously wasn't, but I was in JPAs for all of them, so I've had a lot of good experiences with JPAs and believe that it's a really great way to solve a problem.
I suspect that most of them were set up with a tiebreaker approach.
All but one,
Which one was the hardest one?
the one without the tiebreaker.
Exactly.
No doubt about it.
Right.
Yep.
So, and none of us here set that situation in place. We've all done our part for, whatever time we've been on this, including Lou going way back. But it's
18 and 7.
But it's, 40 years of holding it together. It's taken a lot of work.
Yeah.
But, when we're clear on the mission, it's not impossible.
No.
More questions? Rick?
I attended the first one, so.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Well, I have a comment, and that is $1,420,000, $1,421,000. How are we going to ensure that your recommendations, and this might be a question for Christine, it's certainly a question for Clemens, among staff and all, is there was recently a very, very destructive lawsuit brought by Half Moon Bay against the other two member agencies. It has probably done more to erode trust than anything else in the history of SAM. Particularly because we had the strategic plan. Half Moon Bay council members had participated fully, actively, and energetically.
Constructively,
It was a very constructive project that was put together, and it was well documented afterwards. There were some people who were unhappy, and we were seeking to remedy that with an upcoming one so that everybody felt they had a voice, for those who felt left out. But it as you know, strategic plans are a process. And so we're going to spend almost $1.5 million. How do we make sure that your work product is owned and implemented by not the staff, I trust the staff, but the member agencies, particularly Half Moon Bay, which has a history of city manager turnover that's almost as high as SAM manager turnover. And that's an answer, that's a question that I'm not asking for a quick answer, but it's something that we need to find a way we can all agree to. You can't ask people to sign for a blank contract, and yet this district would be foolhardy, it would be an unwise use of our resources to spend almost $350,000 or $500,000 of our ratepayers' money on something that we're not sure, that essentially could be a gamble. And I'm using a lot of hedging words, I'm really aware of that. I'm trying not to be as blunt as I could be, because I believe we do need to build trust and friendship and rebuild this. But still, for us to be able to do this, and I have confidence in your skills, it's the dedication and ownership by all of us that I'm concerned about.
I think you raise a really good point, and I'm not sure I have a 100% answer, but I think a couple of things I can throw out. And one is, it is expensive and for all three parties. So from an investment standpoint, it would be foolhardy for any of you to do it if you didn't believe that you wanted to have it. In speaking with the 6 board members, there is a universal desire to fix them. Now, sometimes what those board members may believe personally versus what they have to do in their role as SAM board member versus their home board or council may be different, but I am getting very strong indications from all 6 of the SAM board members, and I've also talked to a couple of members on the city council, one other member on the city council, and another member of the Granada board, And their dedication is strong. Now, I think the secret is to get the systems in place so the transparency and the trust gets built and started, and then it will continue into the future. If you don't do it, then you're stuck with never trusting and having this challenge go on for forever. So it's a tough situation, but I mean, is there a guarantee that it's going to work forever? I don't think I can say that's the case, no way. Do I believe, based on my experience in other places, that it can happen, and with the right attitude and the right approach and the right training, definitely can be turned around. And I mean, I don't want to get into a lot of details, but even when I started 13 years ago over the hill, it's South Bayside System Authority at the time, there was one member agency that did not trust anybody, was a constant thorn in people's side, actually did have a veto power, and had a history of years of controversy. And I was able to turn that around and make them all be trusting and knowing that things were going to work together. But it takes time and it takes dedication and a plan to make it work.
Yep. Well, I'm on the finance committee for SAM, and I can see that Stacy is already adopting a lot of what you've been talking about, and I'm impressed. We are going to be having 2 meetings a month to work on SAM finances and to work with the auditor. And Stacy is saying, hey, I'm staff, you're the board members, this is your responsibility to approve, to design and approve these policies and processes. And Debbie Ruddick from Half Moon Bay is on it, and Barbara Dye is also on the committee. And we find we're working very well together, and I think we're making quite a bit of progress. One of the things that Stacy asked about at our meeting yesterday, time flies, was the monthly reporting of finances, and I brought her a format from the fire district that I have found very, very useful. It's not an uncommon format, but it's not one that Sam has been using. And it may be that you want to check the fire district budget is also very, very transparent. And so I gave her that, and we'll see where it goes. Now, my question to the board is, if you look at those SAM board packets online, and you have some ideas on how things can be stated more clearly, let me know, and I will take it to the finance committee, and we will work on it, because there's only 3 of us, and as Ray Kroc said, and it was a good way to start a company, was none of us is as good as all of us. No one of us is as good as all of us, and it's true. There's a lot of experience here and a lot of ideas, and so I look forward to being able to bring them forward. Okay, no more questions? Lou.
Comments.
Lou, I'll get you to fill out a slip before you leave tonight.
Okay. I haven't moved in 37 years, so you ought to know where I live. Although the post office has a problem. First, I gotta say I heard your presentation before SAM Board earlier this week, last week.
Last Monday.
Week ago Monday, okay. And I noticed, and I sat there listening, is that the reactions you were getting from the council members from Half Moon Bay was remarkable. Kumbaya was right there, spirit was right there. But what was interesting, having gone to these meetings since 1980, well, I've been going to the SAM board meetings since 1987, but never saw that kind of comradeship
But if you'd been going to the meetings, you'd realize that the two Half Moon Bay council members were saying things that their previous council members were diametrically opposed to, and caused many of the problems, resulted in many of the problems that you're trying to address here. I think you've addressed all the problems, but you've failed, and it may be because it was in your charge, to address the elephant in the room, or the big ape in the room, which is the need perhaps to redo, and I don't know what's happening with the lawsuit or whether that, to redo the joint powers agreement. The joint powers agreement was written primarily to satisfy the state and the federal government, EPA, with regard to a problem we were having here on the coast side with disposing, or correctly disposing, of our wastewater. And they were coming in with the money to do it. At the same time, the county was developing its local coastal plan. And so there was no thought given, really thought given at that time that I'm aware of, with regard to how this organization should work. And so it was decided that it would work on the way the county's LCP was going to deviate future growth, 50% being Half Moon Bay, and the 30%, 20%, and that's where those figures were, and that's what they came up with in creating this. It also had to do with the fact that the environmentalists had fought the expansion or the building of this treatment plant. They wanted to hold the capacity down to about 100 million, half of what was actually built with the same plant. And the compromise was that will allow you to have what you now have on the coast side, and that's why Half Moon Bay ended up with 1 million, and we ended up with the other, divided the other two. And no one then, no one when we expanded the plant, when I was on the board, both boards, no one thought about the future. No one estimated or figured out that there were going to be additional costs. Things would break down. Things would have to be replaced. Yeah, we're getting a new treatment plant with this free money, and it's great, just like you pointed out. And that's great. But no one thought about how it was going to be in the future. And that's, to a certain extent, we in Montara, Moss Beach, really didn't understand. We went to expansion, but we didn't do some of the studies perhaps we should have, or learn more. It wasn't until after Walt Perkovic had died, was retired from his 9-to-5 job, and he started studying things, and he came up with a figure that, gee, the engineers that built Montara's plant for 500,000 gallons, secondary treatment back in the 60s, they had done their studies right, because there was almost enough capacity in that 500,000 gallon plant to satisfy all of Montara Moss Beach, almost a build out. And that's what came up when I was on the board. We expected to pay Half Moon Bay back for what it and Granada advanced so that we could stay into this project, having lost a lawsuit. They couldn't contribute. We turned it over, and it was turned over because we were under the cease and desist order. We were going to be fined $1,000 a day if we didn't get it under construction by, I think, October 1 of '95. And there was no way to redesign the project to take Montara out. And I pointed out to the board, SAM board, when I was still on it, that we had already, Montara Moss Beach had already contributed, was it $500,000 for the plans and for the environmental documentation that had been prepared for the enlargement of the plant. And so it was agreed, basically like by our attorneys, that we would come up with another 500,000, make it 1 million gallons, $1 million into the advance, and we would do the rest. We would get 100,000 gallons, 500,000 gallons. So we now have in the same plant enough to last us almost to build out present board, not all of these people, the present board I'm talking about, they didn't want to pay Half Moon Bay back anything, and said, we don't need it, we don't need it. And then, of course, at the joint Kumbaya meeting, the last one we had was in 1995, I guess. It was in Hatch School, and we had all 5 members of the Montara board, all 5 members of the Granada board, and all 5 city council members there for the signing of the agreement to build the expansion. And Councilman Donovan gets up, who sat next to me on the SAM board, and says, no, we don't want Montara to be paying us back in drips and drabs as they sell connections and get money to pay for their share of the plant. So what we want is we want them to hold off until they need more capacity and then buy it 20,000 gallons at a time. And nobody on city council in 2002, when they were having trouble and knew that they were going to lose a lawsuit and be in real financial problems and come running to us to pay them back, nobody understood how that was all worked out. There was nobody there. And so what I think you've missed, and you haven't discussed at all, is how do we make the joint powers agreement more equitable for the next 40 years or 50 years. And it may mean scrapping what we got and coming up with something else to replace it with. But as long as we have the agreement we have now, we'll never, ever reach the goals that you're trying to plan for.
Can I respond?
Please.
Okay. I 100% agree with you, Luke. I did have one real quick statement up there about the JPA. I got comments back from people in the JPA that it's a great document, that it's a total piece of garbage. The fact of the matter is you were right, those documents, and I had one over in Silicon Valley Clean Water, very same problem, that it was written to get those facilities constructed and they did not. And honestly, I don't know how they could have looked to the future for 50 years and know what was going to come. But the JPA does need to be rewritten, needs to be updated to facilitate not only today, but at least the next 20 to 30 years where you can have a view of what's coming. So there is time in my proposal to assist attorneys in doing that from a management standpoint. The attorneys are going to have to write the legal work. I can't do that, but it needs to be done.
What you haven't been exposed to, when Half Moon Bay in 2002, 2003 realized they were going to lose the lawsuit, or might lose the lawsuit, and needed money, SAM board, the 2 representatives from Half Moon Bay, made it very clear that we needed to do something to help them. And they said, we need to revise the JPA. We didn't understand why, and Scott was on the board at the time, and he and Leonard Warren they said, well, fine, give us a proposal. We're willing to sit down and discuss revising the JPA. And for 2 years or more, these members would come and say, well, we turned it over to our attorney, and it's not quite ready yet, our proposal, and it just kind of died. They never gave us a proposal. Then they hit us with a lawsuit.
Yeah. I've been through one JPA rewrite in my career, and it took 10 years.
Yeah, well, it's not going to be easy, but
That's
It's
it.
a lot of work and negotiation.
That's it. Lou, I swear we should get Steve, just get you to sit here and just talk about the history of MWSD while the camera's running. I think it would be useful for future board members and all of us. That said, we should probably see what Half Moon Bay is going to do and Granada is going to do. It's not an action item on tonight's agenda. And the next meeting is a special meeting of September 12th. It's mostly going to be about Big Wave and maybe a few other smaller items. So then we're looking at a meeting early in October.
Is there a timescale? Is Sam considered a
I think Sam's
timescale?
board's looking at probably their October 28th meeting,
Something like that, yeah, because there's no early October meeting.
but for me to get around to the different agencies and
Okay.
everything.
Right.
They're looking at.
Okay.
I just want to add in one thought. I thought it several times as you were presenting, the basket of activities are things we need to be doing. I think, I think we all understand, but I just want to put voice to the prioritization on getting a manager in is super important, because as we build ownership and using your collaborative approach to get all the stakeholders at the table, it would be just really weird to do all this work and then bring somebody in and say, this is all for you, but you had no participation. So that said, I think it's useful for us to think about maybe, the ordering of the work, and thinking a little bit about how much of this work might be something that transitions to a manager, or something that we do with staffing at SAM. So as we contemplate it, I would want you to know, I would want to be looking at, okay, do we really need to go through the full thing, or can we transition things onto other parts of the organization over time? And I understand, I mean, you're thinking about, okay, if I'm gonna consolidate my efforts and put a big focus here, this is the package I would propose. I would want you to know, we often think about,
How to divvy that,
Yeah.
can it be divided? And I agree with you. I think what you'll find is that it'll take about 2 years, two and a half years to get to the point where they can really take off and run with it. Can we partial it up or phase it or something like that? Sure, we can figure out some
Well, I
way to
mean,
do
you
that
can only
kind of stuff.
do so many things in a day, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So you're gonna be doing that kind of priority sorting anyway.
Yeah,
So, just to, kind of put an end thought on it, it's like, I think if we're gonna be doing this, and of course we'll discuss it again at a subsequent meeting, but I would imagine that if we would start down this path, we better be ready to sign up for going the full run. Because we may not find an option to where we could shift it to lower cost approaches. So it's like, I would hate to get into it thinking, well, we signed up to this 2-year thing, but we're gonna cheat it. And then find out later, no, we're really gonna need to spend all that money. So I think it sounds like the kind of thing where if we're gonna do it, we should stare that full cost in the face and make a decision that way.
Well, and I think for our next meeting on the 12th, under future agendas, but it relates to this, is let's schedule a short discussion among our board members about what we would like to see in a SAM general manager, so that Rick and I can take it to that discussion, being fully informed. You were on SAM forever, you know about SAM. You were on SAM for almost forever. And
For all of us.
Rick is a granddaddy of who's ever been at
I
SAM.
don't like that term, but that's okay.
I don't know what forever's on.
I like long-term representative,
Oh, okay.
not granddaddy.
Not senior, most senior?
If the baby's cute, granddaddy's a good time.
There you go. So anyway, Dan, thank you so much for coming.
Dan,
I
yeah,
really
Dan.
appreciate it. And folks in the community, please get back to us if you have any ideas on this. I think one of the things that I came up with on costs is, yes, this is going to be very expensive for us, and we're doing a rate study, and we'll probably have to calculate that in. What we won't be able to calculate in is what it'll cost us if we don't fix SAM. And that could be even more expensive. And that's what we are wrestling with now. If we had had a decent process going for SAM some years ago, we wouldn't have had a major spill, we wouldn't have had major fines, and we wouldn't have had major repairs. We could have just repaired the pipe as needed instead of being told it was going to fall apart and then having that come true. So we would have saved more than the cost of this had we done it many years ago. Thank you.
Thank you. Good luck the rest of your meeting.
Thank you. It's really dim in here. Is there a dimmer on the lights?
That's good.
Oh, that's better.
I assumed you were talking about the electricity, not the people.
Of course. Okay, the next item, Dan and Greg, if you could take that outside, I'd appreciate it. The next item is review and possible action concerning special meeting September 12th and cancellation of regularly scheduled meetings September 19th,
Yeah, thank you,
2019.
Catherine. I think the title says it
Kim,
all.
take two.
Do I see the staff report on that?
Yeah, I'm just gonna repeat what we're doing. We're gonna hold a special meeting next week, September 12th, with the purpose of handling actually the regular business, the regular Montara business. We are planning to cancel the following regular scheduled meeting, and hold the, what is it, October 4, was it, I think? October 3 meeting. So we would meet here for a special meeting on September 12th. After that, we would meet again on October 3.
Can I ask why we're canceling the second meeting?
Because we would have 3 board meetings in a row, and up to the September 12th, there is hopefully really no more business to deal with. Another reason is that some directors are not going to be able to attend the second regular scheduled meeting in a month. So these 2 reasons combined. Of course, we're always looking at a joint decision between Catherine and myself. If we need to, we'll hold it. This is a tentative schedule.
Okay.
Do you need like motions?
No, this is
No,
board information.
and now we're going into reports. Sewer Authority Mid-Coast side.
We had the Dan presentation.
We had the Dan
Then there was
presentation.
the energy thing, that big thing.
Amoresco, which was an interesting presentation in that it was a company that essentially will build your facilities. Generally, it's energy oriented, and then you rent them back from them. It sounded a lot like leasing a solar car.
That's what it was like.
Yeah.
Solar system.
And
Net cost of 0.
they claim it's a net cost of 0. I don't
With all
know.
the savings you're going to do and stuff like that. It was interesting.
Right, we approved the design documents for the Granada Force Main Segment 4, which is the last part. And Half Moon Bay Half Moon Bay stated that it was going to be paid for under the yet-to-be-decided way of paying for the force main instead of the existing force main. We'll talk about that in the closed session. We reviewed the SAM budget process and timeline. There is an attachment. It's something Barbara Dye in particular and Stacy and I think Keishan put together for a timeline for doing the SAM budget. Over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of debate and discussion about whether somebody got this, a member agency got the information or didn't get the information, whether they replied on time, didn't reply on time. So we decided to create a timeline that has been adopted by the SAM Finance Committee and SAM Board and is a work in progress, pretty much. But it gives everybody a clear outline of what the action expectations are.
The goal was every group, from the managers to the boards, will have sufficient rounds of discussion all the way through, so nobody can say, oh, well, I didn't know what you were doing. There's manager meetings, board meetings, all the way through the process, so everybody knows what's happening all the time.
And
I think it's a
we're,
nice addition. I think
right,
we
and we're
approved
going
it.
to be implementing and firing up OpenGov, so the public will have access to the documents, and that will, and OpenGov is giving a training session on OpenGov at our next finance committee meeting, and I've forgotten the date. We just thought. Anyway, sorry.
Are your finance committee meetings agendized?
Yes. And there are minutes taken.
I'm gonna ask Sam's staff then to notify me when these agendas are published, so that I think it would be interesting for me or maybe another manager to attend those meetings.
Or all the managers.
And I think I've got to ask that we are notified about the meetings.
Sure. Sure, and particularly because we are now moving to 2 meetings a month, to be able to get the policies done and the procedures done, and the audit. The SAM board is now going to be very, very involved with the audit, the finance committee, whereas in the past it has not been. So the board actually is having to work. The meetings for SAM October 14, 11, and December 23rd are all canceled. So there's only 1 meeting a month in October, November, and December, except for the finance committee. And then we reviewed and discussed the costs of changing medical insurance, and so we changed the medical. It had already been agreed to in the negotiations. And that was the meeting.
That was it.
It was quick.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Any comment, any work or report on the wet weather project? The status of the wet weather project to be built?
No, they're taking it out to bid again.
Okay.
The first time through, there were so many constraints from the ERF lawsuit and everything that people had
It
to
doubled.
bid 2 or 3 times what they had to do, because they're gonna do the whole thing during the rainy season.
Okay.
And it just became a disaster, and they're just gonna go off with the whole thing over again.
Okay.
And with, a slower process with normal bidding, so
Okay.
that's just the only way to do it.
Okay, moving on to Midcoast Community Council meeting. The Gray Whale Cove pedestrian crossing has been, gotten a neg deck, and it's been posted. The Half Moon Bay Local Coastal Program update is on the MCC website. Projects going on is the Cypress Point Affordable Housing, which is 71 units, and that's still under discussion. In El Granada, Harborview Inn will be doing a 15-room expansion, so the economy must be good. Coastside Design Review has vacancies, and we need people to apply. Speaking of needing more people to volunteer for government, that's one that is important. And so that's where the Midcoast Council is right now.
What do you mean by the gray whale crossing
That was my question.
has been posted? What is that?
Where can you see it online?
You can see it at the midcoastcommunitycouncil.org.
Or if you just Google Gray Whale Cove crossing negative declaration, you go right to the study and mitigated negative declaration 2-part PDF.
Yes. And I will comment, not as a Midcoast Community Council, but I had to make an emergency trip with my little dog who needed to go to the emergency vet Monday afternoon, and it took me half an hour to get from Montara to this side, to the south side of Pacifica. It,
Only half an hour on Labor Day. That's
only half an hour, it's normally a 5-minute trip.
that must have been late afternoon.
It was at 5 o'clock in the afternoon.
And that's the return time for all our guests.
So anybody could have gotten across Gray Whale Cove without a problem then.
And swimming would have been faster.
Swimming would have been faster. Anyway, moving right along to California, or San Mateo County, California Special District Association report.
Neither CSDA nor LAPCO has had a meeting. Those are coming up this month and next month.
Okay, attorney
reports.
report?
No attorney report?
I have a question for our next meeting. In talking to Carl Nelson, he was at, I think it was the CASA meeting, and he said that there was a recent court decision that said if you are a customer or connected to an agency that requires a backflow device, and you have a sewer spill into your house, even if you don't have a backflow device, this will strike a memory for Lou, you are now responsible for your own damages. And it's not a problem for the sewer agency because it has done all that it can because it requires a backflow device.
I'm
So-
familiar with that case.
Oh, so.
That is, I'm familiar, I need to read it, but.
Yeah, just a quick summary because
There was Nimber's condemnation claim.
Exactly.
And that's, the court said, does not apply. That precluded the property owner from covering damages under that theory because it is strict liability for the reasons that you state.
Right, and I think we need
They may have
to
been able to recover on other grounds though.
we
but-
need to pay attention to that and maybe review our ordinance.
Okay.
We had a lawsuit here.
A very expensive one.
Oh,
And
for my
what
time.
happened is we were sure we were going to win.
You were a
But
child.
our insurance company decided they didn't want to go through the trouble of continuing. The trial was already a year away, and so they settled.
Oh. Take a look. That's
Thank you.
good.
Thank you.
Good idea.
Director's reports? Hearing none, general manager's report.
Yeah, I attended today the Region 5 meeting for the Association of California Water Agencies, ACWA, and that was a nice networking event. We essentially got an update from the rather big agencies that are dominating Region 5, which are San Francisco, East Bay Mutt, CCWD,
Contra Costa.
CCWD, and what is now Valley Water District. And the topic was essentially the water supply situation, and that is a usual topic at the Region 5 meetings. And having been there for over a year, it was very interesting to note that the agencies now really see that California is in a continuous drought with some rain years versus, I think before the attitude or the preparation was more along the lines of let's prepare for some drought years between our normal rain years. What I really found fascinating was we are in a very specific situation here through our public works plan, having to prepare for droughts in a specific manner. We had to set aside 50% of our capacity for drought contingency purposes. And so the big agencies take a very different approach to that. So this is, for example, a slide from Valley Water District. So their service level goal is to develop water supplies designed to meet at least 100% of average demands identified in the Valley Water System Master Plan. So their goal is to have water for all their customers. That's what it is.
Just enough water.
Just enough water. And during non-drought years, 80% of average annual water demand. So that means, of course, water conservation, cutting off golf courses, this and that. So I think
So
that's,
wait, and so in drought years, 80%?
in drought years, 80%, which is,
Didn't they say
I
that we're in the
I think it
drought
is.
100% of the
thought it
time?
was non-drought, so that's.
Yeah, we're in a drought 100% of the
100%
time, so they only need 80% of what
yeah.
they're selling now.
I'm sorry, drought years.
Okay, all right.
And so I have to find that very interesting how I think the approach is very different. Knowing how the water supply situation in California is currently unsustainable, really, is adding to this, quite frankly, right? I mean, there's a real desire to find new sources. Recycling is something that's been mentioned, but if you look at the numbers, I think the biggest share that I've seen was 5% of a water supply of one of the larger districts to recycled water. So they're really looking at local sources. That's where we can increase. State Water Project is cutting down. San Francisco's water supply situation is getting less and less secure. So they're looking right and left to increase their water portfolios. So I think the pressure for local
Water
sources
protection.
is going to increase significantly. Yeah, but I thought that was well worth sharing, how much planning we've done on our end compared to really the large agencies. I think it's very encouraging to see what we've been doing here.
Good, thank you. Well, let's take a recess. Oh, let me see, future agenda items. As I said, I'd like on our next one, we've got collections, contract status update, action minutes review, and then the third one I would like is just a brief discussion with point from all the board members on what you see as valuable traits and skills in a new general manager at SAM.
Are we gonna talk about also the program we were just presented with? Or just the
You
general
know,
manager issue?
I would prefer to put that off and see what Granada and Half Moon Bay do.
Okay.
I want to take a leadership role of watching.
Like that.
The city was interested in Dan making these presentations to all member agencies, right?
Right.
You recall that, right? That it was initiated by the city to
And
invite Dan, right?
I think what that will do is give you time to talk to Mr. Dowdy and Mr. Nesbitt and Chuck, and so that this board can get a better informed sense of the feelings of staff on this.
Would it be appropriate for us to give an indication of how we feel about it at this time? So the other two agencies, I mean, we don't want to catch 22 where everyone's waiting for the other to respond.
I wouldn't mind doing a straw poll, a brief kind of thing at our next agenda, but I don't want to make any kind of official decision
No.
because we're still collecting information.
Right.
And
But-
so it would be a straw poll.
Okay, yeah, I would recommend that.
I'm for that.
That's a good idea,
So
thank you.
that'll be on the agenda?
Yep,
then?
we'll put it on the agenda.
Okay.
We'll call it straw poll. Okay, let's take a recess and for 10 minutes, and we'll convene in closed session.